If you believe that true love begins with destiny, then stay with this story until the very end, because before there was a cowboy, before there was a promise beneath the snowy skies of Norway, there was a young Apache girl whose heart had already been broken by life. This is the story no one ever heard. This is where everything truly began. Long before anyone knew her name, she had learned that love could disappear without warning, and that the strongest people often carried the deepest scars behind the quietest smiles. On a silent winter evening, deep inside a small wooden cabin surrounded by endless pine trees and frozen mountains, the young Apache girl sat alone beside a warm fireplace. The fire gently danced across the room while snowflakes drifted outside the window. She held a silver necklace tightly in her hands, staring into its beautiful pattern as if it carried the voices of those she had lost. The cabin was silent except for the crackling fire, yet her memories were louder than the wind outside. Every corner of that little home reminded her that some people never truly leave us. Her name was Ingrid, and before Norway became her home, she belonged to a family whose traditions were older than the mountains themselves. As a little girl, she spent countless evenings sitting beside her beloved grandmother, listening to stories about courage, loyalty, family, and the invisible bond between two souls destined to meet. Her grandmother believed that every generation carried a responsibility to protect the wisdom of those who came before them. One snowy afternoon, just before the first winter storm arrived, her grandmother gently placed a beautiful silver necklace into Ingrid's hands. The necklace was simple, but beautifully crafted, decorated with ancient symbols that represented hope, strength, and love. Looking into her granddaughter's eyes, she smiled softly and whispered, "This necklace carries the spirit of our people. Never wear it for pride, wear it to remember who you are. One day you will place it around the neck of someone whose heart is honest enough to protect yours." Ingrid looked at the necklace with innocent curiosity, too young to understand the true meaning of those words, but she promised she would never lose it. Years passed, and life changed more quickly than she had imagined. The laughter that once filled her home slowly disappeared, and one heartbreaking goodbye after another left her standing alone with nothing except memories and the necklace resting close to her heart. Her grandmother's final embrace remained frozen in her memory forever. Before closing her eyes one last time, she whispered, "No matter how far you travel, never stop believing that kindness always finds kindness." Those words became the light that guided Ingrid through every dark season of her life. She carried them with her wherever she went, even when the future became uncertain. Standing beside her grandmother's resting place one cold morning, Ingrid quietly made a promise to continue living with courage, even if she had to walk every road alone. She never imagined that this promise would one day lead her across the world to the snowy valleys of Norway, where destiny had already begun preparing a meeting that would change two lives forever. Leaving behind everything she had ever known was the hardest decision Ingrid had ever made, but every corner of her old life reminded her of the people she had lost. Carrying only a small travel bag, her grandmother's silver necklace, and a heart filled with unanswered questions, she boarded a plane to Norway, believing that a new beginning might help her find the peace she had been searching for. When she first stepped onto Norwegian soil, an icy wind welcomed her, carrying the scent of pine forests, frozen lakes, and distant mountains. Everything felt unfamiliar, yet strangely beautiful. The quiet villages, wooden cabins, snow-covered roads, and endless white landscapes made her feel as though she had entered another world. Days quickly turned into weeks as Ingrid searched for work and a place where she truly belonged. She accepted small jobs wherever she could, helping in local cafes, cleaning guest cabins, carrying supplies, and doing anything that allowed her to survive. The money was never enough, but she refused to give up. Every evening she returned to a small wooden cabin hidden near the edge of a pine forest, where silence became her only companion. Sometimes she would sit beside the fireplace for hours without speaking a single word, listening only to the crackling wood and the wind brushing against the cabin walls. Although Norway was breathtakingly beautiful, its peaceful silence often reminded her how alone she really was. She missed hearing her grandmother's voice, missed the warmth of family, and missed the feeling that someone somewhere was waiting for her. Whenever loneliness became too heavy, she would hold the silver necklace tightly in her hands and remember the promise that kindness always finds kindness. Those memories gave her just enough strength to face another day. As winter grew colder, the snowfall became deeper, covering every path leading to her little cabin. Many evenings she stood outside, watching snowflakes fall across the frozen valley, wondering whether destiny truly had a plan for her or whether she would spend the rest of her life walking through the snow alone. Yet despite the loneliness, she never allowed bitterness to enter her heart. She smiled at strangers, helped elderly neighbors carry firewood, shared warm food with travelers whenever she could, and believed that every act of kindness mattered, even if nobody noticed. The people in the nearby village slowly began recognizing the quiet young woman who always offered a gentle smile, despite carrying sadness in her eyes. They admired her strength without knowing the story hidden behind it. Unknown to Ingrid, every choice she made was quietly leading her toward a single, unforgettable night. Somewhere beyond the frozen mountains, another lonely soul was traveling through the same endless snow, completely unaware that their paths were about to cross. Fate had been moving them toward each other long before either of them realized it, and the longest winter of Ingrid's life was about to become the beginning of a story neither of them could ever forget. Winter settled deeper over the mountains, and the nights grew longer than ever before. Snow covered every trail leading to Ingrid's small wooden cabin until the outside world seemed to disappear beneath a blanket of white. Inside, the fire burned quietly, filling the room with gentle warmth, while the wind whispered against the windows. Ingrid wrapped herself in a wool blanket and held her grandmother's silver necklace in her hands, tracing every small detail with her fingertips. It had become more than a family treasure. It was the last piece of home she still carried with her. She closed her eyes and remembered her grandmother's final words, reminding herself that even the coldest winters eventually welcomed spring. Although tears filled her eyes, her heart refused to surrender hope. She believed that somewhere beyond the endless forests, life was preparing something she could not yet see. Outside, the snowstorm became stronger, covering the valley in silence. The cabin stood alone beneath the dark Norwegian sky, surrounded by towering pine trees and frozen mountains. Ingrid added another log to the fire and quietly watched the flames dance across the room. She had no idea that only a few miles away, a lone traveler was struggling through the storm, searching desperately for shelter before the freezing night became impossible to survive. Fate had been guiding both of them along different roads for years, bringing them closer with every difficult step they had taken. Then, just as the wind reached its loudest cry, a sudden knock echoed through the cabin. Ingrid froze. No one ever visited her home during storms like this. For a brief moment, she wondered if she had imagined the sound. But another knock came, stronger than the first. Taking a slow breath, she walked toward the wooden door. As she opened it, a blast of icy wind rushed inside, carrying thick snowflakes into the room. Standing before her was a stranger wearing a weather-beaten cowboy hat, a heavy winter coat covered in snow, and tired eyes that revealed days of difficult travel. Neither of them spoke for a moment. They simply looked at each other, as if destiny itself had paused time. Without asking who he was or where he had come from, Ingrid stepped aside and quietly invited him inside. The warmth of the fire welcomed the exhausted traveler, and in that simple act of kindness, two completely different worlds finally met. She could never have imagined that this unexpected visitor would become the man connected to her grandmother's promise, the one whose arrival would change the course of both their lives forever. The lonely girl who had crossed the world searching for peace had finally reached the moment that destiny had been preparing all along. This was the end of her untold story, but it was also the beginning of a far greater journey. The promise, the love, and the unforgettable romance that followed all started with one cold winter night, one quiet cabin in Norway, and one knock on a wooden door. The rest of their story had only just begun.